My name's Alex Russell. I'm an MBA fellow in the Center for Digital Strategies. I'm here with Chris Wiesler, Director of Global Connectivity at Facebook, who leads the Internet.org project. So Chris, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, good to have you back up here. So I think last time we talked was about a year and a half ago. You had just taken over at Internet.org. The project was pretty much just a white paper at that point. So what's been going on? What's happened over the last year or so?
Let me start by just saying what Internet.org is, because it's out there. A lot of people have different impressions of what it is, but essentially, Internet.org was born out of Facebook's mission as a company, which is to give people the power to share and make the world more open and connected. And with that in mind, and after spending about 10 or 11 years connecting people, certainly to Facebook, there was this broader mission out there, and that was, how do we get the nearly 60% of the people on the planet who aren't online on the internet, if they want to be? And so with that in mind, our CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, launched Internet.org in late 2013 with that big goal, bringing the rest of the world online. And it's meant to be a 10-year initiative, so we're a year and a half in. We're just getting started. We spent a lot of the last year trying to understand the big barriers to connectivity, and then started to define some projects and staff up teams to really start removing some of those barriers.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned some of those barriers to connectivity. What have been, as you get up and running in a country like Ghana, what have been the biggest challenges? Is it physical infrastructure? Is it political? Is it kind of getting all the pieces of the stack aligned?
It's really a mix of barriers. So a couple of the ones you mentioned, for sure. Lack of physical network infrastructure is definitely a barrier in many places. There are some big affordability barriers. So the affordability of a device that gets you on the internet, the affordability of service. And there are also some, what I'll describe as content barriers. So in many places, even if people could get online, there's no local language content for them to consume. And in other cases, the issue of illiteracy, whether that's digital illiteracy, people just aren't familiar with technology, or actual literacy, is a big impediment to getting people online. Then the last thing I'd mention is awareness. And this might seem surprising, but in many parts of the world, there are millions, hundreds of millions of people, even within a given country, who just aren't aware of what the internet is and why they'd ever want it, how it could provide some utility or value in their lives. Mm-hmm. So we're working to overcome all those barriers. And when you pick a specific country like Ghana, for example, it's a mix. It tends to be a different mix in each country. But in Ghana, for example, we launched a network using some new sort of spectrum that's coming into the mix, some TV white space spectrum. And so, by doing that, we were overcoming the lack of physical network infrastructure barrier.
Mm-hmm. And to what extent is this sort of a very country-specific, what works well in Ghana won't work in some other countries in Africa? Or have you sort of gotten to the point where you've got kind of a recipe for what works well in getting something like this up and running?
So there are certain things that we think will work well everywhere. One of the first things we tried to test was partnering with mobile operators to overcome two key barriers, the affordability of service barrier as well as the awareness barrier. And we wanted to really take a good shot at doing that with mobile operators, because when you look at global network coverage data, nearly 90% of the people on the planet live within some sort of wireless signal. Granted, in many places, it's only a weak sort of 2G signal, mm-hmm. which it's hard to have a mobile internet experience on. But still, even 50% of people in the world live within a 3G signal. Yet, there are billions of people that live within that network coverage who are not online. So we've partnered with mobile operators around this concept of creating this on-ramp to the internet for first-time internet users that offers them a set of free basic services. We kind of put all this together in the Internet.org app, and then we launch it in a market in partnership with the mobile operators. It allows people to come on to the internet, to not have to pay for it, and to really experience for the first time sort of the power and the utility and value of the internet. So we've launched that now in I think 8 or 9 countries, and we'll continue to do that throughout the next year and beyond.
Interesting. And I know that's kind of that approach of a select set of services has gotten kind of a bit of pushback in some countries, such as India. Sort of how do you go about kind of selecting what that kind of package of basic free services looks like, and then in response to some of that pushback, have you adjusted anything? Or are you still kind of working that out?
There are a number of stakeholders involved in figuring out what that suite of basic services looks like. The way we approach it is to try to come up with things that are universally appealing and are very high utility. So there are things like search results, Wikipedia, weather information, local job listings. Facebook, of course, is in there. And just other things, in some cases, some e-government services that the government wants to make sure that all of their citizens have access to. And so the formula is a little bit different in every country based on the inputs from carriers and governments and what content is available. And we're sort of working through how that all comes together. It's not meant to keep anyone from going out into the broader internet, but it's at least a sort of an on-ramp of that these things are free to first-time users.
Interesting. So we're here at a business school. I feel some obligation to ask, what's the business model behind this? Is there a plan to generate revenue here, or is it pure altruism, or somewhere in the middle?
It's I mean, I guess if Mark were sitting here and, if you tried to force him to choose, is this like market-driven or is this more mission-driven? I think he'd say it's both. In the short term, it's certainly more mission-driven. He was the founder, he's still the CEO of the company, and he has been for 11 years. He's 30 years old. And so he can be very patient. He thinks that getting the rest of the planet connected is the fundamental challenge of our generation. And so we're going to work on it for a while. And I think, the belief behind it is that everyone has the right to participate in this global knowledge economy. And internet connectivity is that essential ingredient to allowing people to participate. So, I mean, I could tell you that, in our history, when somebody has gone online, a very large percent of them choose to become Facebook users. It's one of the first things that people want to do. They want to connect with family and friends and things that they care about. But I can also say that in these markets that have low internet penetration, where we're focused right now, these are not mature ad markets, and we have an ad-driven business model. So for every new user that we generate on Facebook through this initiative, these will not be money-making new users for us for some period of time. With that said, we hope that getting people connected to the internet gives them more income, gives them better lives, and does some of that flow to Facebook over time? Probably, but whether that's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, it's kind of anyone's guess at this point.
Yeah, interesting. So when I first got my first cell phone, I'd had internet before, sort of had a sense of kind of what to do with it, what websites to go to. Have you seen any differences in someone who kind of all of a sudden adopts internet and connectivity for the first time, kind of how they use it? Are there differences between those folks and folks in developed countries in terms of kind of their internet usage patterns?
It's a great question, and it's something we're interested in. It's still pretty early for us, and because we've launched in so many diverse countries, we're still sort of trying to make sense out of all of that. There are definitely some commonalities. I mean, when we look at the suite of services that are free, I mean, we see people using local job sites, and we're seeing a lot of usage of maternal health sites. People are definitely using Facebook. They're using search results. So it's a mix. And it's not unexpectedly, it tends to be pretty high utility things.
Interesting. So one of the main theme of the center this year is this idea of hyperconnectivity and both expanding any kind of connectivity to people in developing countries as well as for people in more established companies. They're online all the time on their iPhone, their iPad, their computer. Sort of as that presence of connectivity increases, how do you see Facebook's role sort of evolving if people start having their iWatches and kind of all these new ways of accessing the internet? Do you think Facebook remains sort of this social network, or do you see it broadening to other roles?
Yeah, it's we've kind of expanded what I would call the Facebook portfolio families pretty significantly, even just in the 3 years I've been there. So, it used to be just the blue app that would show up everywhere on all the mobile platforms, on the desktop. And since then, we've acquired Instagram, which now has hundreds of millions of users. I think over 300 million we've announced recently. We acquired a company called WhatsApp, which is one of the leading sort of messaging services, and WhatsApp has got 600 or 700 million users worldwide. Facebook Messenger has grown significantly. That's over 500 million monthly active people are using the service. So we're continuing to develop content and services that allow people to share and communicate. I think that will continue. We'll make those available on, sort of all the sort of top platforms and products that people use to access people and each other. In terms of expanding beyond, I'll say, the content and services realm, I think the mission of Internet.org definitely puts us in some different arenas. And connectivity, the sort of basics of connectivity, even network connectivity, is one of those arenas. We do have a team that's embedded within Facebook's infrastructure team called Facebook Connectivity Labs. And they work on some terrestrial or more traditional approaches to connectivity and sort of pushing technologies and network architectures. But they also are spending a significant amount of time on space-based approaches to connectivity, where we're defining certain approaches to using satellites and high-altitude solar planes and some other approaches to provide people affordable connectivity in places where they've been hard to reach in the past. So those projects have a little bit of a longer bake time, but they're underway and should deliver some interesting results over time.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, Chris, this was a really interesting conversation. Really appreciate your insights on kind of all the great work both Internet.org and Facebook are doing.
Thanks, Alex.
Great to have you back up here.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks.